All right, looks like it's 9 o'clock. Chair, it's up to you. I guess the gavel us in when you're ready.
All right, we will call to order the Monday, October 20th, 2025 meeting of the Tennessee Real Estate Appraiser Commission. Go ready for roll call.
Thank you, sir. Taylor Vandever, Brett Mansfield,
Here.
Will Haston,
Here.
Francie Mello,
Here.
Sandra Tuck,
Here.
Nelson Pratt,
Here.
Dr. Sunderman,
Here.
Eric Robinson,
Here.
Alex Bynum.
Here.
All right, great. All right, well, we do have a quorum, Chair. Let me go ahead and just remind everyone that we do have a public comment period at the end of our meeting. Those that may be present or online, you may sign into the chat or sign into the pad here at the podium when we get to that moment. But that'll be at the end of new business right before we adjourn. And also for our meeting notice, we can dive into that. The notice of the October 20th, 2025 meeting of the Real Estate Appraiser Commission has been noticed on the website since September 25th, 2024. This month's agenda was posted on October 13th, 2025. So then we're at the agenda.
All right, has everybody had an opportunity to review the agenda? Any comments?
Motion to approve the agenda?
Got a motion on the floor?
Second.
A second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next up on the agenda is the approval of the July 21st, 2025 meeting minutes. Any comments?
Motion to approve the July 21st, 2025 meeting minutes?
I have a motion on the floor. Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, up next is the experience interviews.
All right, let me turn my iPad around. You do have a list, per usual, of our experience interviews. I'm gonna go down the list and then just pause for each member that has interviews to determine whether or not they had anybody they'd like to add. First of all, one add-on, Will Haston. You had Drew Myers for a certified residential upgrade. Did you have anybody else, or is that all you had on your list?
That's all I have at this point.
Okay, sounds good, thank you. With the recommendation for approval for him. Brett Mansfield had Parker Gray, certified residential, and the recommendation for approval.
Correct, yes.
All right. Ms. Mello, you had Jaron Sissom, certified general upgrade, and a recommendation for approval there.
Correct.
All right. Mr. Pratt, you had Jack Hatcher, certified general, recommendation for approval.
Correct.
Ms. Tuck, you had Kira Knight, or Allie. I said Kira Knightley. Can you believe that? I was like, she's really suffering in her acting career if she's got to, like, you know. All right, so Kira Allie. We're not trying to upgrade Miss Knightley. She can continue acting. All right, for license, recommendation for approval.
Correct.
All right, thanks. And then Vandever as well, Cade Thatcher, he won't be here today, as you know, from the roll call, but his recommendation was for license and a recommendation for approval as well. And we just need a motion in that regard.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Got a motion on the floor?
Second?
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right, so education report.
I would like to make a motion that the report be accepted. I've reviewed all of these and I recommend approval.
So I've got a motion on the floor.
Second?
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right, thank you. You guys are just efficient. I mean, yeah, I know. I'm getting cocky that we might get bogged down somewhere, right? All right, so a director's report. This is where we go awry right off the rails right here. I've got a budget report and Aero conference update and travel. So the budget report, information purposes only. Good there. All right, so we, at our last meeting in July, we reviewed all the months of record available to us through May. Unfortunately, we only have one more month of record to review, which is June. The only thing that jumped out at me was the technology line item under June there. That appears to be a result of STS charges due to the various projects enhancements that we have them working on right now. We would normally have a couple more months of record, but we're waiting for the trending analysis and the reserve balance to finalize, to close out for the year, and that'll be later on this month. So unfortunately, that wasn't in time for your meeting, but we'll just have more to cover at the next meeting. That's fine, we'll hit it then. But I could just give you kind of the rough numbers since before that closes out. This one, right now, we're in surplus of this year of 24,000, which that's pretty close haircut when you're running a budget, an operation the size of us. So there's a couple adjustments we made. One of those adjustments will affect us, and that will be just, we're going to probably postpone the spring aero travel, just to kind of keep an eye on that. Fall's fine, we're good at that point. And plus, we moved some salary items around just to make sure, just want to out of abundance of caution, want to make sure that we're tracking where we need to be. If we can avoid, any other sort of big movements, that's probably best. But those like low-level fruit, we'll just hit that. So that's the only thing I saw that kind of jumped out at me. I'll have, of course, more to report when we get to our next meeting. But we're at a really good place. We've got a lot of our programs. I've got one out of our 5, our portfolio, but a lot of programs running in the red, so they're just exhausting their reserves before they start doing fee increases. We're not there. We're at a good place. And so just want to give you that quick little update. We do have a total reserve balance of $3.3 million, but when you're looking at 2,500 roughly licensees, that's substantial. So, we wouldn't be, if we got to the point we're running in the red for whatever reason, everyth's more expensive. Go buy bread and milk, right? And so, we're seeing that trickle down. But if we get into the red, we'll just go to those self-sufficiency hearings along with everybody else and bleed our reserves a little bit. All right, of course, but we need to do the stuff we can do, and some of those things, such as I mentioned, such as looking at travel, also, moving some salary pieces around. That just seems prudent. So we've done that, and we'll keep tracking on. Y'all have any questions? Yeah.
So, of course, I'm new.
Yeah, that's all right.
And why is income continuing?
Commissioner Bynum, if you
Yeah.
will turn on your microphone, please.
Sorry,
Yeah.
my bad.
All right.
So why is income continuing to go down
Licensing
drastically?
revenue. We've actually seen a dip in new licensees, and so that directly affects our proportionate. Interesting enough, we've seen that same dip. I've got 5 programs. I've only seen that dip in 2 places, and it'll make sense when you think about it. Real estate appraisers and home inspectors, which they're kind of tied together. So I think the market is affecting that.
So from 2022, where there was $1 million in revenue, to now, which is 779,000, has the licensee number gone down that drastically?
Yeah, it is. I've seen some of the projections. We have an analyst that works in that regard, a business analyst over an admin side, to help us with that, because we got to do we want to make sure our proposed budget fits with the trending analysis, and that was my question too, and because I also saw that in our surplus was already dropping, in the last several years, and so but there's the direct correlation to licensing, and so yeah, that's it.
Okay. And last question is so for this year, I'm just trying to, on income, where's the fines that you assess?
That's under case revenue. That'll be right at the top.
So
you've got-
case revenue is $500 for the year?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely correct. Yeah.
Lots of people not getting in trouble.
Yeah,
Okay,
well,
all right, good deal. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. No, those are great questions. We went a little bit over the P&L piece of it, but yeah, we're just keeping an eye on that, making sure, well, and, one of the lion's share of our licensing revenue is reciprocity. We get some upgrades. You guys get those experience interviews, and so you've got a feel of that just from that, the experience report that you're looking at. But the lion's share of our licensing is reciprocity. So, if they've got whatever the market's doing, they may be expanding their business there. Maybe they don't. Maybe they, as you guys know, as business folks, sometimes you don't want to grow too fast, and so you don't launch out into new markets or expand. You kind of hunker down a little bit if you think there's going to be any shrink. I'm not saying that's the case, but where it does occur, So I think all of that trickles down and affects us. And I'm seeing that trend consistently across the industry, not just, it's not in Tennessee, that's industry-wide, so. Yes, ma'am.
I'll make a comment on, this is just projecture, but I was initially licensed in 1991 with all the other appraisers, when we started. And a lot of those people have retired now. And so that may not be that we're gonna have every other year, we're gonna have more people one year than the other.
Yeah. And and that tracks, if you look at the revenue at the bottom, there's a couple of years where that's exactly the case. Because they also renew, every 2 years. So wherever they came in, so if you have a burst of folks coming in, well, in 2 years, you're gonna see that burst again in those renewals, if they renew, obviously, assuming they renew. But I've seen some of that with some of our other programs as well, where, 1 year, they seem to be a little higher than each subsequent, the subsequent years. And then you see that same loop every 2 years, which tracks. So, larger trends too, certainly can affect that.
One final comment I'll make on that too. I think it's a good point you bringing it up. I think the $1 million was in '22, and it's kind of come down each of the last 4 years. And it looks like 5 to 7%, which seems to be about what we're seeing with licensing too, right? I mean, that trend, to Sandy's point, like just kind of keeping an eye on that, of the number of people that are retiring or getting out of the industry versus new licensees, because if you look at the number of people we're reviewing, that number seems to be going down too from experience review. So
Yeah.
just something to keep an eye on, I think.
No, that's great, and that's what we're doing. So, and as compared to other programs, we're in a good place. A lot of folks are dealing with market pressures, so I feel good about where we're at, and we're going to keep tracking it. I mean, we've got our our finger on the pulse, and so there shouldn't be any surprises.
Glenn?
Yes, sir.
Quick question. So, did you foresee any things we should be worried about over the, let's say, next 3-4 years? I mean, I'm obviously in academics, and, the universities have to look at trends coming up in the next few years, and I didn't know whether this is pointing to something that may be happening in our industry that we may need to begin to think about or make adjustments for, whether this is going to be impacting us in terms of demand for appraisers or a trend in terms of housing demand or whatever.
Well, we
Because
try.
we don't want to be caught off guard.
Right. The best way to track that really is through the associations and through the conferences, like Ms. Tuck attended at Arrow as well. And so, that's why conference travel is important, so we don't cut it out entirely. We'll reduce it a little bit, but we had one this past a couple weeks ago, and so we won't need to go to the spring one, but nonetheless, and then plus our counterparts in other jurisdictions, we maintain pretty good relationships. I do with my counterparts in those jurisdictions, and so we're talking, but there hasn't been anything that's just jumped out at anyone to make us feel like that's like a that there's some behemoth on the horizon that we need to be worried about right now. And to your point, it does seem to be like incremental. Yes, ma'am.
The new UAD 3.6, which I'm going to talk about
Yes,
in
ma'am.
my report, but the projections that I heard at Arrow were that 15 to 20% of the appraisers currently working as residential would not transition to completing that report. And also you've got more waivers from lenders that are not requiring appraisers. So that could have a long-term effect on the number of appraisers in the industry.
Regulatory schemes outside, I mean, not talking about state, but federal, your industry is different than a lot of our other industries. I mean, we all know that. And so those type of requirements can, be disruptive in a market. We see that sometimes, and so that's always a possibility. And so anytime there's new requirements that trickle down or onto our appraisers, that's something that we watch. Obviously, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know how it's going to play out. Usually, pretty quick. Some of that's intuitive. You've been around long enough that you start to get a feel, kind of the word on the street. You kind of know where it might be going. Instinctively, you kind of know where it might go. But then we just wait till we get some real hard data to play out. So that's something certainly we're going to watch, and something I'm glad you're going to bring up. I appreciate that. I look forward to that discussion and hearing from you guys on that as well. But yes, that certainly could be a disruptor. Mhm. All right, anybody else? Okay, and if you come up with any other question on the way home or just thinking about it, have some burning questions, just let me know, reach out, and then I'll certainly get that answer for you. All right, Arrow Fall Conference update and travel. The update, Ms. Tuck will be providing that. Her and Melanie were able to be in attendance to that, and Melanie gave me quite a report. Ms. Tuck's going to cover all the high points, I'm sure, so there's no need for me to read from there, but it was very helpful to her. She was glad to attend and just learned a lot, and they covered a lot of territory from what I understand, so I'll let you take it over. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, this meeting, the Association of Appraiser Regulatory Officials was held in Atlanta, October 6th through 8th, and I just put together some comments, so here we go. The Appraisal Qualifications Board, the AQB, is looking at whether a college degree is going to be required in the future to be a residential appraiser. They have a qualifications reassessment project, which is looking at education, examination, and experience. An exposure draft is expected to be issued before the end of 2025. Also, the AQB is going to have an exposure draft on PIREA and the timing of the required experience to get credentialed. When you're doing PIREA and the experience, they want to look at that. To date, about 4,400 people have inquired about PIREA, and there are 183 active participants, 53 graduates, and of those 53, 32 have received credentials, which is about 60%. And that's very similar to the 2024 pass rate for the residential exam of 62% and 54% for the CG exam. 44 states have adopted PIREA, and 9 additional states are in the process of adoption. Another avenue into the appraisal field is a practicum program, such as the program established by Melissa Bond, which we approved for Tennessee in our last meeting. And I understand that Farm Credit also has a practicum program. The main area of discussion during the conference was the new UAD 3.6 that will replace the UAD 2.6 that has been around since about 2005. Development of the UAD 3.6 began in 2013, and it is a dynamic reporting system for residential appraisal of all types of property. What that means is that we're not going to be just filling out a form anymore. It's going to be when you put into your computer, for instance, that it's a condo or multifamily, it's going to pull down the data fields that are needed to be completed for that. So it's going to change. It's not a static form. And I said that if the appraiser enters a property that's in a condo ownership, the system will show the required items to be included in a condo appraisal or multifamily, et cetera. And there are 29 possible sections in this new system that you can pull down, that will be there. And 18 of those sections will always be present, and 11 more that are conditional upon what property type you state. Okay, the limited production of this new form was to have begun on September the 8th, 2025, and extend through January 25th of 2026, when the broad production would begin. That phase is scheduled, the second phase is scheduled through November the 1st, 2026, and thereafter, only the UAD 3.6 can be submitted to the GSEs with the exception of revisions to previous UAD 2.6 reports. The software is being developed, and each software provider will have their software approved through the GSEs. But as of mid-October, none of the software providers had completed this development. And they're hoping that the first of the software developers will do this by November or December. It's an entirely different report than the current UAR, and if I use the word form, I'm wrong, because it's not considered a form anymore, it's a report. Currently, appraisers, and this is so significant, collect about 500 data items when we're at a property for a typical report. But under this new system, that should increase to 1,500 data items that will have to be collected. The report will allow comments under each section, but appraisers won't be allowed to add addenda like we have in the past. Some changes include that each detached building will be described separately. The room counts will include bathrooms, and they did say and kitchens, but I've always included a kitchen. The distance from the ground to the front door will be shown. The ceiling height of each room will be shown in the appraisal. Land value support will include a grid for supporting land value sales, whereas now that's been narrative or not all included if somebody just said it's in my file. The former neighborhood section will transition to a market analysis section. The word basement will no longer be used, and it will only be stated as above grade or below grade square footage. Overall, the reports will be much more uniform so that they'll be easier to review. Because of the large amount of data that will be collected on every house, it is expected that appraisers will transition to mobile applications to collect the data, but presently only 22% of appraisers use mobile apps in the field while they're inspecting. The appraiser will have defined data elements in structured fields with little narrative commentary expected, no data addenda allowed. Freddie Mac's Scott Reuter expects fewer revisions because of this structure, and they expect higher appraisal quality, which should result in lesser defect rates and less overvaluation of properties. The market analysis and adjustments will be affected greatly. Valuation support for adjustments is currently considered to be a big problem by the lenders. Under the new UAD 3.6, support for adjustments should increase. There should be more charts and graphs in the appraisal. A challenge to this new UAD, which, as I stated, is supposed to go into broad use in January of 2026. No, I'm sorry, November of 2026, is how appraisers are ordered and priced, since the appraisal will change as one system will cover all property types. Appraisers are being asked to gather a significant amount of new data that was not previously collected, even though, and this is so significant to me, that data may not contribute to value. So I guess I have the question is, why are we to be collecting it if it's not going to contribute to the value? And it hasn't really been discussed as why so much additional data is being required. There will also be the question of whether the appraiser is subject to greater liability, particularly from homeowners, since there's going to be so much more data about their house in the appraisal. And as you might think about, an appraiser is collecting all this data on their subject, but they may not have that similar data on their comparables. Because if they didn't see that house, the MLS system currently only covers a select group of data items. But we'll have to just see what happens when all of this comes. The new system will be a huge change for appraisers and reviewers, but as regulators, and I'm talking to all of y'all, who review appraisals for credentialing, both residential and general appraisers should be familiar with the new form. There is a 7-hour course online that regulators can complete to be more familiar with the new system, and sample reports are available on the Fannie Mae website under tab D. It's estimated that 15 to 20% of current residential appraisers will not transition to the new form and will either complete other non-GSE assignments such as private work, or they will retire. The average age of an appraiser is around 56 to 58 years old. Currently, there are about 65,000 unique appraisal licenses in the U.S. In 2016, there were 92,000 on the registry. And only 53,000 of those were residential. In 2025, the residential number had declined to about 38,000 appraisers. And by 2030, it's estimated that the total number of appraisers in the U.S. will be around 48,000, with 27,000 of those submitting reports through the GSE portal. Other items of discussion about the Appraisal Foundation was about the Appraisal Foundation's Harmonization Task Force, which has the goal of standardizing licenses in each state in regard to the AQB criteria. For instance, 7 states don't allow a license category. Pete Fontana is chairman of this task force. He's from Montana, and he's going to be visiting the board meetings of many states, and he commented to me that he hopes to visit Tennessee also. And a 2026 document is being issued about the standardization to the national standard. Fannie Mae had a session on their tips and referrals that are sent to the state boards, and another session was on appraisal enforcement and the regulations related to this. And then lastly, we heard about appraisal quality monitoring and the major items that they considered to be the most problematic, and that was market conditions, the inclusions of buy downs and seller concessions reported in the appraisal, problems with an FHA assignment to a conventional mortgage program, changing a rating from C5 to C4, which most lenders will accept, but still having the as-is deficiencies, and a C2 rating with no stated updates, and finally, using a C1 condition rating as an incorrect classification per the definitions. So that's that in a nutshell, is what we learned.
So you didn't cover anything, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
And that there was a lot going on. Melanie said as much as well. I think the UAD is interesting. I'm glad you highlighted that, and the Harmonization Task Force as well. Basically, they always give us a note, and they have a website too that tracks any requirements that are in addition to the minimum standard. And so I think that's what they're trying to do, is buff that out with and using, it appears, soft power to do that, by visiting, really in essence lobbying. And so we'll see what that does and what that entails. I mean, it's the states, have they're entitled to add whatever, requirements in addition to the minimum. So there's nothing that would be illegal about that, certainly, and it's their prerogative to do that. But I suspect what they're going to do is sort of an education tour where they go around and just highlight that, and and give you the opportunity to do whatever you want with that. But ultimately, that's your prerogative. So we just have to hit the minimum standard, obviously, and we're doing that, and that's not a problem. But yep.
One comment, Sandra, just want to mention to you, a couple of the courses that we just approved already are discussing this new.
I've taken one.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that we approved courses, so our appraisers have that opportunity to begin getting familiar with what's coming down. So I think I'm pleased the fact that we have these courses beginning to appear. So it's not going to catch our appraisers totally off guard. Because from what I was looking at, it looks quite impressive. I mean, I'm not sure, from some of your comments, gathering a lot of information that's not even relevant. Seems like it's going to be a major burden on some appraisers, but I know it looks very nice, the fact that you're not filling out multiple forms and everything is more. Sounds good.
I have a question. On this form, I have not really looked it over yet, but are they keeping the rating system C2, C3, C4?
Yes.
Okay, so.
Yep.
if somebody-
Just, yeah.
If somebody has remodeled a house, it's going to change from C4 to C3, C2, and if we're not allowed to have an addendum with an explanation,
Okay, it's not that you're going to not be allowed to have an addendum. Each section will expand however much area you need to include the comments under that section. Like under improvements, you could write all of it. It's just not going to be somewhere else in the report.
Are FHA and VA going to adopt this?
FHA is, I haven't heard about VA.
And
I think they do expect them to follow suit, maybe just not on the same timeline.
what happens if you have to get, what happens if you need two appraisals for FHA from two different people, and you have two different sets of results?
I don't know.
I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just read everything, and I read it again, and then I read it a third time, so I like to be exact.
All right, well, we're going to keep tracking that, and thank you for bringing that to our attention and that discussion. That'll be interesting, so more to come. All right. Did you have anything else you want to add, Ms. Doug? All right, thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your service to us and to the state by going there and also just, sort of acclimating Melanie as well to to the industry and to the whole process. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, Sandy, that was awesome. That report was incredible. So thank you so much for your notes on that. That's great.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Okay, then the travel portion of it, instead of piecemealing it, I'm doing this with all of our boards. I want to just, like, at one slate, the last meeting, say, we're going to approve all of these meetings, you know what I mean, for whatever members want to go. We don't have to select the members. We've done that in the past, but that's not necessarily required, just approving travel. Really, it's for us, so we can say, this is the expected travel, and if it's not on the list, let me know, you know what I mean? So we don't miss something, because we got to get pre-approvals for that. This board's a little bit easier because you've got Arrow, you know, and so the only thing we would be asking for membership at this time, attendance to, would be for the fall conference. And so we would just approve that. And we don't have to select the members. When we get close to that time, we can decide then which members want to go, can go. And by then I'll have a really good, we'll be full swing into the, well, actually we'll be wrapping up the fiscal year. So we'll have a good picture of our budget and, you know, what the allowance will be. So no problem. But that's all I've got, unless somebody else has another conference I'm not aware of or, you know, affiliated, associated with the appraisal industry. Arrow Fall Conference is the only thing that we would need approval for, and just for our membership to attend that.
Is that something we need to vote on?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments or want to?
Were you saying next fall?
Yeah.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. Make a motion
Yep.
to approve the Air Conference for fall of 2026.
Yep.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor.
A second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right. Thank you all for doing that. That was
Didn't
really
even-
amazing.
Haven't they moved the spring one online anyway, or was that just a
No,
one-time thing?
I think it's a one-time thing. They do that every once in a while. I don't know if that's a cost-saving thing or they want to bring in more people, because not everyone attends both conferences. I've noticed with a lot of the industries, most folks pile on the annual one, and the spring is more of an optional one anyway, you know. Now, some of the other boards that have governing bodies, unlike Arrow, they have delegates and they vote on model law or comedy or industry standards. Their spring meeting is their region meeting. That's where the conference, the Southern Conference or Region 3, if they're architects or whatever, meet. They kind of work out the details in their committees, and then they have a vote to the full floor, the parliamentary sort of procedure, and that's typically how they do that. So, you know, if you want representation into you're baking you're putting the ingredients, in the bowl for the bread, and then at the annual meeting you're baking it, And so that's not really the case with Arrow. So that spring one's a little bit more optional. Now, we reserve the right, if they cover something just radical, then we'll probably send somebody, business need, we'll revisit it then. But just as a matter of practice, at least for this year and maybe the following year, we'll take a look at the budget and see where we're at. But the fall is the one you want to go to. All right. Oh, so I guess we're ready for legal.
For legal, yes, correct.
All right, and before we lead in, I just wanted to let you know it's very important to the legal section. We have a birthday girl that's going to be presenting the legal report when we get there, Miss Hilton. So 21 today and just passed the bar, yesterday or so, yeah? Congratulations, yeah.
A couple years ago, so
Anna wants me to clarify that I passed the bar like 4 years ago.
All right, fire away.
Okay. I'll just go through the closures quickly, and then we can get into the other ones. If there's any questions, just stop me along the way. Number 1 is 2025-033-261. I was recommending closure on this one as I referred it to an expert reviewer who found that the report was overall credible and did not observe any use PAP violations. Are there any questions about that one?
I'll make a motion to close case 1.
Got a motion on the floor?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, number 2 is 2025-034-561. This complaint was opened internally after the respondent marked no on question number 3 of the notarized declaration of owners, basically reading, have you ever been convicted of, pled guilty, or pled no contest to any criminal offense? We later learned that was not true. However, this respondent has already come before the commission when obtaining their license, and the commission has approved their license, and no further action was taken at that time. So this was opened as a procedural matter, so I was recommending closure.
I'll make a motion to close.
Motion on the floor?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Number 3 is 2025-039071. This complaint was alleging respondent abused their position as a member of a county board of equalization. This complaint is outside the jurisdiction of the commission, and also the respondent noted that they are no longer practicing appraisal business anymore, so I was recommending closure.
Motion to close.
Got a motion on the floor?
Second.
Should we, sorry to jump in here, should we flag this in case the respondent comes back and wants to renew their?
We could, but overall, I was going to close this either way just because this is outside of the commission's jurisdiction.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
This is in a personal capacity that they were making a
Got
complaint
it.
about.
Got it.
And just as a matter of procedure too, you guys can obviously pause for discussion. We got a motion in a second, but to chair, if you want to pause, and then they can amend those motions when we need to, but you just a clarification. Yeah.
I'm good, yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, number 4 is 2025-041271. Complainant is the homeowner of the property appraised. They filed a complaint requesting a refund from respondent. Complainant alleged respondent was extremely delayed in providing their appraisal report. However, complainant has since requested to withdraw their complaint, citing that all issues have been resolved with the respondent. As such, I was recommending closure.
Got a motion on the floor?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Number 5 is 2025-048841. Complainant is the homeowner of the property appraised. They allege respondent's report contained multiple use PAP violations as well as characteristics of the subject property misrepresented. I referred this to an expert reviewer. The expert did not find any use PAP violations and found the report to be overall credible. As such, I was recommending closure.
Make a motion to close.
Got a motion on the floor?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Number 6 is 2025-053441. This complaint revolved a homeowner of the subject property, and they allege that respondent was having unprofessional business practices. Based on the overview of it, the respondent is explaining that they declined to take the report due to it being involved in a contentious divorce proceeding. There was no violations of anything within the commission's jurisdiction, so I was recommending closure.
Motion to close.
Got a motion on the floor?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, number 7 is 2025-033101. The complainant is a financial institution involved in the appraisal. They allege that respondent improperly permitted a trainee appraiser to conduct the appraisal report of the subject property. Respondent explained that the trainee, who is a license in Alabama, was present with the respondent. They state upon further review, they realized that because the trainee is not licensed in Tennessee, they were required to return to the property and conduct the full inspection personally. They say that they take full responsibility for the oversight. Counsel was recommending the commission authorize a consent order requiring respondent to complete the 4-hour supervisory training continuing education course within 180 days of the execution of the consent order and to be on top of minimum continuing education requirements.
I've got a question. Do we know if the trainee actually signed the appraisal report, or did they just inspect it and didn't say they did?
They inspected it and didn't say that they did. Is my understanding from the complaint. We had a similar one like this a few reports back, and this is the same continuing education you guys voted on, so that's where that recommendation came from.
And I'm not sure that you know this, but has the trainee been licensed in Tennessee at this point, or?
I do not have that information. Anna can look it up.
Do we know if they clarified in the certification who inspected what versus then just not going back to look at it themselves?
It was not
It was
clarified,
not disclosed
no.
at all? Okay.
The financial institution found out from the homeowner.
Okay.
But the respondent was honest in their response to the commission.
I would think that if the trainee is qualified at this point, that what's the form that the supervisor appraiser needs to fill out in order for the trainee to do inspections on their own?
The law experience?
Yeah, no,
Oh,
it's yeah. I would imagine that they need to look into that as well.
I think that would only apply if they were a trainee in the state of Tennessee, though. If they're not, I don't know.
They are a trainee in the state of Tennessee.
are.
They are already licensed in Alabama,
Okay,
is what
my
he was
mistake.
referring, and now they're a trainee
My
in the state of
mistake.
Tennessee.
Got it.
Sorry, one second. She's just looking for the name of the trainee in the complaint.
While we're waiting on that, can I have another crash course into how that order of how the commission, like, we send a letter to when we do this and when we would actually find somebody?
Yeah, so this recommendation is for a consent order, meaning it's basically a settlement offer. I would write this up, send it to them, tell them they could take this course, or whatever the commission votes on, but based on my recommendation, this course for the 4-hour supervisory training continuing education. If they agree to that, they take the course, they send the course in, and then the complaint is closed, and this remains on their record. If they do not accept this consent order, the next step would be for it to go be set for a hearing.
Thank you.
And if you can issue a civil penalty in any complaint that you feel deems it.
What, would you restate that, please?
The commission has the authority to issue a civil penalty in any complaint they feel deems that type of discipline.
And just a little history on that. When I first was on the commission, I felt like that was more of something that we used in our arsenal, and we've kind of got away from that. I'm not sure why, in favor of one or the other, but we've moved to a more education-based.
Yeah, since I started with the commission, it's been that was what I was initially told is the main goal is getting education. But you guys absolutely have the authority to assess both civil penalty and education, just civil penalty.
Brett, was there education in conjunction with the civil penalty? Is that how y'all handled it?
Yeah, typically it was education and then some sort of civil penalty. So they spoke on this at Arrow when I was last there, and this was a couple years ago now. And it was the gentleman who was the attorney, and he talked about this scenario. And we run into this a lot, and I'm not sure why appraisers do this, because the current form is set up where the trainee could sign it, and then the supervisor could say that they just didn't inspect that. And so, I don't know if it's like the lenders don't allow that or where that's coming from, but, we run into this a lot. It, could have been a mistake, and, but I think there's some appraisers out there who just send trainees out and don't, don't sign off on it. So, it is a serious thing.
Well, if you read it real closely, though, it does say that the respondent was on site with the person.
Oh, okay.
He didn't send him just on his own.
They
He just
they
wasn't
explained in
feeling-
their response, that they were not feeling well. So I cannot say for sure, but the way it read in the response is that they stayed in the car and the trainee went in.
Okay.
And then the homeowner reported it to the financial institution, who then filed the complaint. Anna's been going through the complaint and the response. They don't say the trainee's name, so I cannot confirm definitely if they've become licensed or not.
I move that we accept the recommendation.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor. Any further discussion?
My only discussion piece of that is that there is a cost of business to have these reports, these complaints looked at. And then when you find somebody that has done something that, is worthy of action, why we would not try to at least try to recoup, in the best interest of the state, to try to recoup some of that money for, that cost of business, for us to be able to do that. That's my only concern with that is that I look at it from the standpoint of, okay, we had to pay somebody to review this, then, you go through that, you do find that there is something that action is required, and why we would just say, okay, you need to take education, but there is no fine being levied. That would also be a deterrent for those to, to actually do better.
I see your point. I think the only thing I would say maybe on the flip side of that would be, to me, just reading the case here, it doesn't seem that they've gone to a step that would warrant a civil penalty consistent with other penalties that have been assessed in the past. I think particularly since they were honest about it and were physically on site, just didn't want to go into the property. So I get what you're saying. I just don't know in this case that it would warrant a civil penalty, in my opinion.
We still have a motion.
I'll go ahead and second the motion.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yes, I do appreciate your comment, and I think that we may want to start considering that with the more grievous situations. But I agree, this may be too minor of a situation to consider a financial penalty, but I do appreciate your comment. I think this is something we should consider because this is a cost that this committee end up bearing.
And I would say that that's, me being the, the member at large, a public member is that when I read this, it reads as almost like fraud. Okay, so if the public was reading this, they would read this complaint as almost like fraud. So it seems very egregious to me is that you have a, if you have a document that's signed by one that did not complete it and they acted like they did, that would be fraud as far as if I'm in the public, the way I would read this. So to me, it seemed egregious, and it's good to know that it may, as a standard of practice, it's not.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
The next one, number 8, is 2025027641. And this complainant, again, is a financial company. And they allege upon reviewing respondent's report, they determined there was reasonable belief that the report contained material deficiencies. Respondent explained that at this time, when they were completing the report, they had multiple personal issues going on that they believe affected their ability to complete the report. I referred this matter to an expert reviewer who found that the report contained substantial errors and mischaracterization of the subject's property condition. In the selection and analysis of comparable reports, they determined that these inaccuracies rendered the report misleading and to have a material effect on the final assignment results. Council was recommending the commission discuss if they believe that continuing education is appropriate, and if so, what continuing education would be the best course.
I do think that this case, may warrant some consideration of a civil penalty. To have the violations of this of standards 1 and 2, the way the reviewer found it to be, I think, that's a pretty significant violation or group of violations. I'm not advocating for a civil penalty, but in the discussion that we've had in the last 10 minutes, I believe that this one could warrant that. But I just wanted to start that. And also, is there a matrix? I know that we've had that matrix of continuing education. Do we have that to where we can put it on the board, or?
The list of the
list?
continuing education
Yeah,
courses.
yeah.
So we have corrective courses, I think is what we spoke about before, where
Right.
Glenn emailed out the list, but we can pull up the list, yeah. I'm going to email it to Anna, and she's going to pull it up.
Okay.
I'm not against the idea of continuing education, but what I'm reading here is this is not an individual who needs more education. This is an individual who frankly should have stepped away from this case saying, I've got personal issues. I can't focus on this. And the error was they went forward. I mean, I think a penalty fits us a whole lot more than requiring them to take courses on stuff they already know. I mean, I see that there was no previous action ever taken against this individual. So obviously, I would assume that they've done a very good job as an appraiser in the past. They've had some unfortunate personal issues, and they frankly should have said, I need to leave for now.
Sorry, we're just pulling up the courses. No, I think that's a great point. I do think that they do not have a history of any disciplinary action within the relative time that we put on here. And it does appear that this was a personal incident going on with them in their personal life that affected their report. So I'm open to whatever the commission thinks is appropriate, whether they think a civil penalty, continuing education, or a combination of the both. I feel it's appropriate either way.
Do we have any courses that deal more with maybe ethics or any, I mean, because what we're dealing more seems like rather than training on how to put together a report, it's more knowing at what point I need to step away.
It looks like one of the courses says and I was just scrolling by it. It said ethics, competency, and negligence is one of the courses that they offer.
And these are 4-hour classes, correct?
Yes, and they do not count towards continuing education.
While they may have been upset over their personal family problems, they still shouldn't have looked at comparables that were superior, and that's really a misleading report.
Any further discussion? Anybody have any thoughts on a motion?
And again, you're able to do civil penalty, continuing education course, a mixture of the both, whatever the
I would
commission
think
feels
that
is appropriate.
There needs to be guidance from the commissioners that have been on here on civil penalties about what's appropriate in these situations.
I believe there's a disciplinary matrix too that they put out for first-time offenses, and so it kind of gives us some guidance. I mean, I would think for something like this, I mean, I don't know that I can recall us going above like $1,500. That seemed like pretty substantial. Maybe like $500 for a first-time offense.
You guys have the ability to do it up to $1,000 per use PAP violation, per violation of the
Per
commission's
violation, okay.
regulations.
You said per violation? Okay.
I have a question. Did the financial institution assert that the property was overvalued, or?
They just, in their complaint, they just noted that upon reviewing the report, they found that there was material deficiencies which in the report, which may have impacted the total valuation. They didn't specify.
So the expert reviewer is going in and determining the quality of the comparables as well?
Yeah, the expert reviewer reviewed the report as a whole, and they found that there were material defects that made the assignment result misleading. They reviewed it as a whole.
Quick question on reviewers. Do we have multiple expert reviewers, one expert reviewer?
We have multiple in different areas of the state.
And I know, just wanted to state further, had this discussion before. So we had kind of discussions related to expert reviewers finding violations, and we're like, you could find one in any report. But if you look on this legal report here, we did have a couple of complaints that were closed because they didn't find any. And so I think that's a testament to explaining that the violations that they do find, they're looking for specific ones, and it's possible that they don't find them. So I just want to give, I guess, some more credibility towards our reviewers.
Yeah, I would definitely second that. We definitely have reviews that come back, as noted in this report, where they don't find any reviews, and they note that they could say this one sentence should be read this way or that way, but it doesn't affect the overall credibility of the report. So I would agree with Anna. When they find issues, it's because they believe it to be a true issue.
Yeah, I was just wondering, if we only had, one expert reviewer, which I'm sure we, obviously don't, but that it would be pretty significant if you found none on the other ones, or she found none on the other ones, and then this one was found to have violations. I would imagine that that's pretty significant, so that's why I was asking.
I think it might be appropriate to require that they take a sales comparison approach course, and also have perhaps a $500 fine, because this is pretty egregious when you're using 3 comparables that are superior to your subject and not adjusting.
So just a couple questions on that. Is that in the form of a motion? And do you want that to, go towards continuing education or an addition, or?
If they do the corrective courses, those cannot go towards communication
Yeah, I
either
think
way.
She mentioned, she's talking about this sales comparison, the reconciliation one?
With that one or a similar one.
But yeah, just clarify that in the motion overall, if you want this to be something that can go
Does
towards
anybody
continuing
else have
education or not.
comments? I mean,
I would imagine this person would need to be, have the ethics, competency, and negligence class in addition to the sales comparison, if that's what you're recommending. Sandy.
So the traditional sales comparison class for QE, I believe, is like a 30-hour class. So just to, there's a difference between that and the 4 hours here, so.
Yeah, I'm just referring to the corrective.
And you could do either or.
Yeah.
Like if you wanted them to do, the regular sales comparison, have it count towards CE, you can. Or you can still ask them to do the regular sales comparison and not have it count towards CE.
I wouldn't think the 30-hour sales comparison is what we're referring to here at all, right? I mean, if somebody disagrees, please speak up, but I think you're talking about more of the corrective courses as opposed to a 30-hour course, right? I mean, that's what I would interpret. I don't know if you can put that in a motion or not, but, I mean, but I wouldn't, that's what I'm clarifying, are you talking about the 30-hour or the corrective courses for that?
any other comments?
Do we know the cost of revision? Is there a set cost? Is that an outsourced?
Of the review, the expert
Yes.
review, yes, they have a cost per review, but we typically, even if we have complaints across the board, don't do it per expert review cost because that's a contracted price. And also, their cost may exceed the amount of the civil penalty variation. So you have the authority to do 0 to 1,000. But for example, if there were 4, use PAP violations, you could do a maximum of $4,000 civil penalty related to that. But like Taylor said, you can do a combination of civil penalty and courses. The only reason, Commissioner Pratt, that I was saying I was kind of not hearing the corrective education is due to the egregiousness of the complaint. So I do think we should clarify whether we want to do the 4 hours or the 30 hours. So,
And how many violations, like, I'm trying to add this up correctly, how many violations were there found in the report?
We don't know.
I'll pull up the expert review.
Because it just says the following use PAP violations, is that,
For multiple, no, because that's standard 1B, standard 2, which is.
3.
Yeah, so there were multiple issues found, but those issues resolved around the same use path violations. So so they found a lot of issues, but they all were related to standard 1, 1B, 2, 2, 1A, 2, 1B.
So there are at least 3.
Yes,
so there were 3, which could be fined individually.
yes.
Ms. Tuck, I think you had a motion. Did you want to amend that, or?
I'll make I make a motion that we assess a civil penalty of $500, and we require this person to take the sales comparison, the shorter.
The corrective education course.
Corrective education.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor.
I'll second that motion.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. The next one is number 820. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the one I just did. The next one is number 92025029021. Complainant is they did not clarify, but it appears to be the homeowner of the subject property appraised. They allege respondent's report contained multiple discrepancies. This matter was referred to an expert reviewer. The expert reviewer found, based on the violations within the report, that a highest and best use course would be the best action for continuing education.
There's a lot more here than just highest and best use, so,
Yeah, sometimes the expert reviewers, they provide information on what a course they think would be appropriate, and so it was just, that's the recommendation that they gave.
Yeah, I would think that with the amount of information the reviewer provided and found deficiencies with, that there's probably a number of courses we could recommend for corrective education. I guess he is, or she is, recommending the 15-hour highest and best use course. Is that correct?
They recommended a highest and best use course. I put the 15 hours on there after looking into what the most typical course load is.
Could you bring up the matrix one more time? I'm sorry. Unless someone wants to recommend a more stout education requirement other than corrective? I would make a motion, and this definitely can be added on to, but I see a residential report writing versus form filling class. I would make a motion that this complainant be required to take that along with, could you scroll down one more time? Along with missing explanations and I'd say assignment conditions, elements, and results.
okay, we've got a motion on the floor.
And, I mean, if we're following through with going down the civil penalty route, I mean, this seems to be fairly significant as well. You know, I would imagine that civil penalties that we could consider could amount to the cost of an appraisal. I mean, a typical appraisal usually runs, or a residential appraisal runs between $500 and $750. So I think that's how we could base, if we're going to go the civil penalty route, we could base our civil penalties based on that as well, to be considered. So I'll just add a civil penalty of $500 as well.
Okay, so just to clarify, we've got these 3 corrective education classes, so the residential report writing, form filling, missing explanations, correct? And then, what was the other one? I'm sorry.
Assignments, conditions,
Assignment,
elements, and
conditions,
results.
elements, and results, as well as a $500 civil penalty. And so we have that motion on the floor.
Question, how many hours for each of these courses?
4.
4? Oh,
Also to clarify, are you saying those 3 along with the 15-hour recommended by legal?
That was my question. Thank you.
Yes, for sure.
So we're looking at, was that 27 hours of CE plus a civil penalty for this? Is that kind of what you're saying in your motion?
I mean, I'm willing to reduce one of the classes off the corrective education if you feel that that's penalty is significant, because that's obviously it's 27 hours on top of the 30 hours that they would need for the continuing education.
There's also a 7-hour highest and best use class, I believe.
Yes.
But, no test involved with that. I
Yeah,
don't
this one
think.
requires a test. That's where I put that recommendation into there, but I'm open to whatever the commission thinks is appropriate.
What was their 2015 letter of caution on?
It was on, I had, it was for use BAP violations and licensure cautioning. I'm pulling up the consent order.
And how many use PAP violations are there in this one currently?
This person has been licensed since 1991, so they've been appraising for a long time. They just did a very sloppy job on this, obviously.
I counted 7 violations. In the zoning description, it looks like violation of standard rule 1, 3A. And then the next one under hypothetical conditions, standard rule 2, 2A, 11. And then under site characteristics, there are 2 as well. And then there are 2 under highest and best use. Oh, hold on, math. 1, 2. Okay, he got 7. Yep, 7.
Hey, Anna, can I ask you a favor? Could you click on the register here, and so we could just kind of see the ballpark price of these classes to have an idea?
Also, I have the letter of caution up. It doesn't give much information. It just says that they found use PAP violations and that they're not going forward with formal discipline, but that they want them to be aware. It doesn't give too much information.
I have another quick question. It shows that, shows his licensing expires on 9/30/2025. Has he renewed his license?
Can look at it.
Well, can you check that? I'll drop you their name.
Is this gonna force him into retirement?
You know, another significant thing I'm seeing up here is respondent was unwilling to revise the report after the alleged discrepancies were brought to their attention.
That, and just to clarify, that was complainant's allegation in there.
I would believe that more than $500 would be warranted for this.
I'm also looking up how much the 15-hour use highest and best course is.
Yeah, because those three, it was $325 apiece, and so then I would think you're gonna have,
And this respondent has renewed, so their license is active.
so you're probably looking at least $1,200 in corrective education fees and then another $500 on top of that, right now with where things stand.
And if, it says in here, the improvements do not conform to the existing zoning, so the highest and best use would be not correct in what they did. And so they went ahead and completed a whole appraisal on an incorrect assumption. That's very misleading.
And keep in mind too, once they sign the consent order, that's disciplinary record on the ASC registry too. That's the thing they'll be most concerned about, because that'll affect, because everyone's gonna be pulling that when they send them on assignment.
So I think we still have a motion on the floor, correct? And that included this class, the 15-hour highest and best use, the 3 corrective, and then the $500 civil penalties. So do we have any comments on that?
Did you get a second?
I did not get a second.
No. Motion on the floor.
Yeah, if we don't get a second, then the motion will fail and we'll just have to get another motion, but.
I second the motion.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
And that highest and best use, it says it typically costs around $595.
That was my only question, is just about what that would be, just so we can kind of clarify the motion of what we're talking about here in totality relative to corrective courses, those costs, and the fine. Can we just summarize that? of
I
what that looks like?
did the math and it's around $2,000, including a civil penalty.
Were you gonna say something? I'm sorry. Okay.
I would just think that $1,000 would be more warranted in this situation when you have something that, when we look at the one that we just fined $500 for, and this is much more egregious, and there was already a letter that was out there. This also, I would say, with this many findings, I would say that this is not something that is a one-off. This is just the first time that there's been a complaint.
And I want to clarify, upon review, I think the other one, the reviewer noted that the report, the one you guys just did previously with the fine, noted that the report was misleading, and I don't believe that was a finding in this report. But you guys are the experts in what this means. I just want to make sure we're being consistent between.
Well, if they were analyzing a use
Yeah.
that's not legally permissible.
No, I understand. I just want to
it would
make sure
be
we're being
illegal.
consistent between giving the 500 and going forward with the courses. Sorry.
So then the path forward with the motion in a second, unless the second was voluntarily withdrawn, then you'd have to vote on that one, yeah.
Correct. Okay. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Recuse?
Move on recused. Any opposed?
Aye.
One opposed? I believe motion still carries, correct? Okay, motion carries.
And just to clarify, the motion is for the 15-hour use PAP course, the 3 corrective action courses, and a $500 civil penalty.
Correct.
Okay. The next one is number 10, 2025-029-441. Complainant is the homeowner of the property appraised. They allege respondent's report included numerous oversights, errors, omissions, and inaccurate information. I referred this matter to an expert reviewer. The expert reviewer found multiple violations. They also note that the appraiser provided a revised report reflecting an increase in value. However, no explanation was provided addressing why a revision to value or replacement of the sales data was merited. Council was recommending the commission discuss this one and determine the appropriate continuing education course, and now based on the previous ones, if a civil penalty is appropriate.
Can you clarify one item that's stated in there?
Yes.
It says that the complainant left a detailed message, which they didn't get a response back. If the client was the lender, then do we know if the appraiser, did they respond to their client, the lender, with a response? Or, because I wouldn't expect them to contact the
Sorry,
property
yes,
owner
they
anyway.
responded to the lender, yes.
lender.
Sorry, I can see how that reads
Yeah, 'cause
confusingly, but yes.
I can see
yes.
where they would not want to
Yes,
respond to
and
the
that's what they were
property
trying to
owner at all.
clarify, is that
Yeah.
they've responded to that.
Yeah.
But they did not enter the homeowner as they did not feel it was appropriate.
Right,
And that was
okay.
one of the homeowner's complaints.
Yeah, got it.
Anybody have any thoughts?
I mean, kind of the same thing I just asked. I mean, to me, it comes down to, did they provide the explanation necessary to the client or the lender? But we don't, I guess the appraiser's saying that they don't have any communication relative to if they communicated those back and forth with him.
Correct, yeah, they were speaking with their client, the lender, and
Right.
the complainant is the homeowner who felt that the
Right.
appraiser should have been
But
communicating
would
with
the
them.
review appraiser, hey, would he or she may not necessarily have that communication anyway if they had a phone conversation with the lender? So
Yes.
I guess that's what I was trying to clarify. It's, you know.
Yeah, we don't have that
Yeah,
information, but
right.
the reviewer found that based on the revised report, there was no explanation within the revised report included.
I guess then would it be common for someone, if they submitted a new or revised report, to explain the differences between the previous one? I think that's the context of that. Is that typical or not, right?
I think the highest and best use issue, the lower tax rate, and they didn't disclose that. I don't know that that impacted value, in my opinion. You know, lack of analysis in the sales comparison approach, and that might be something we want to look at. I'm not quite sure how to interpret the reconsideration or the review. I mean, that does happen. You know, lenders will provide you sales, and, you know, if the appraiser wants to add those or find their new data, then that could change. And so,
Yeah, and I think the reviewer didn't have insight into that either. That's just what they were trying to
Yeah.
note, that this did change, but they don't have.
and I'm not sure where that would
explanation for.
fall into. I have to explain between this, like where under USPAP that would fall under that. Hey, I've submitted this report. Now I'm resubmitting it, and what details do I have to go into there? So those are kind of my thoughts. I think more of the sales comparison approach is the issue, but definitely open for further discussion.
That's a pretty significant increase in value, 100,000. I would think even if you weren't required to explain it, you would want to.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think you're right. I think the context that we don't have here is what communication potentially was with, with the appraiser and the lender. And $100,000 may be a significant value if the property's worth $300,000, or, is the property, we don't know here, worth $6 million, and that's a 1% increase, right? So I think that's difficult to judge too, if the dollar amount is egregious or not, because we don't know how it relates to the percentage of the overall property. So I think some corrective education may be warranted, but I don't know that we have enough data to do any, enough information here to do anything more really than what legal counsel's suggesting relative to education, in my opinion.
And I may have missed this, Nelson, but is this case related to the original appraisal or the revision?
Let me just pull up the complaint just to clarify before I give you an answer. Off the top of my memory, I believe it's about the entirety of the situation, and the respondent provided both the revised and the original report, and that's what the reviewer looked over, but
They would have just changed the date of the report for the revision. But they should have put in a section on what the revision was and talked about that. I don't quite understand where it says the respondent failed to report and analyze the subject property being located in a county with a lower tax rate. And then they said that 4 of the 5 comparables are in another county with lower land prices and less proximate community amenities. In other words, did they overlook sales in the county? Or I'm just not sure from reading all this what they're trying to really tell us.
Yeah, I don't think we have all the information, but to me, it implies that this is potentially a larger property with, they specifically mention community amenities. I mean, it kind of makes me believe this is a larger property.
it's described as a farmhouse,
Okay.
just to clarify. So I
Farmhouse,
believe
okay.
it's probably on some land.
Potentially maybe where there's not other comparables in the immediate county of similar amenities. Just from reading that, that's the problem. I don't know that we have enough information.
And then just to clarify also, Commissioners, based on your questions, just to read directly from the report, it stated that 4 or 5 of the comparables included in the appraisal are in a different county, an area of lower land prices, and less proximate community amenities relative to the subject's county. And they found that this reflected noncompliance with multiple use map violations. That's what the reviewer noted. They said that the appraiser was provided with 3 additional home sales, a vacant land sale, and an active listing for consideration. And they said that the appraiser addressed each of these sales, why they were not used, and they did find that to be credible, why they excluded them, but they did not find that the comparables that they did use were the appropriate ones based on it being in a different county and the location.
So it sounds like a pretty complex property. This individual has been licensed for 25 years with no issues. So, it's not easy to appraise something that there's not a lot of data on. So, anyway.
I don't have a problem with a reviewer in this situation, but I'm just saying that I think this goes back to our discussion in the previous meeting about our review process and the complaint process. I guess I am asking, or I would like to see a little bit more clarity from the reviewer on how, I don't know what that looks like, but I would like to understand this report to make my own decision on this.
Yeah.
And I know that that's not going to happen. I'm just saying, that first statement immediately, talking about the highest and best use from the reviewer, immediately sort of makes me question the review. And again, I'm not saying that it's a bad review. I'm just saying I don't understand why that's pertinent, really. And that they're involved. That gives me, that question makes me question the review.
We can try to, I can work with Glenn with a way to maybe potentially, and also I need to pass this up above me, but to redact the reports, a redacted version of the reports. It's kind of hard because so much of the report contains information about the property that would make the complaint no longer anonymous. So that's a problem we face with giving out the reports.
Sure. And again, I realize that all that is very difficult. I'm just, now I'm sort of trying to understand
Yeah.
the review of the report.
And I could read a little bit more of what they have in their comment section of the report, and it says, the submission of a materially higher, and also, sorry, if I stop for a second, it's because I'm trying to make sure I don't read some of the information about it, but the submission of a materially higher value in a revised appraisal report, particularly in the absence of a significant market change or new compelling evidence, raised concerns with compliance for USPAP in this report. The significant upward revision in value without clear evidence of why the new data is more comparable than the previous data creates the appearance that the revised report may be not compliant with USPAP.
I'd like to sidebar with Taylor for just a second about maybe some solutions, you know, in that regard in response to your comment about reviewing that. Give me just a second there. All right, I just wanted to get a consensus before we threw it out there, because, you know, you guys have some different considerations. Not all boards are created equal, right? I mean, you guys probably know you're the best, right? My point being, though, is that, you know, you have to look at the process of, and then we can borrow from some of our other boards. And one thing that A&E does that I think might be useful here in this case, or in cases like this, not in every one, because we don't want to like completely upend your process. I think it works pretty smoothly. But in cases where you would like to see that data, one of our members can be selected to look at it, represent, and then they can offer their opinion based on what they saw, but they have to recuse themselves from the vote. And so that would be the only issue in that regard. And then they get all the data. They can look at it all. And so that's up to you. I mean, if you want to do that or sort of bake that in the cake if you want to, but for your discussion.
I would be willing to do that. I don't have a certification where I'm a licensed review appraiser. So I would feel, you know, a little bit like I'm not being forthcoming with my experience reviewing appraisal reports. So I don't know if that's like Eric's type, but, you know, but I can review, I would be willing to do that.
Well, and you're not necessarily an expert reviewer in that regard. You're just adding your opinion, and it would be, you know, categorized as such. You know, that disclaimer that it's your opinion based on what you've seen. But you know, typically we'll work in concert, and then from there we'll make we sometimes will have our, for lack of a better term, expert reviewers. You know, our members in those other boards, and they'll sometimes recommend disciplinary action or whatever that they think is appropriate. And it's robust discussion. There's sometimes the members say, no, I don't think so. I think, you know, collectively, because, you know, you're looking at in isolation. You don't get, so obviously that will change when you go to the collective, and then there's going to be some adjustments. So as long as we're, you know, open to that, and, you know, obviously no one here is going to take that personal. If they make a recommendation and the board doesn't agree with them or commission agree with them, then that's their prerogative, and I welcome that. There's been times that I've walked into a room thinking that we're going in one direction, and by the time I stress test it, you know, you build something, you shake it a little bit, and you're like, oh boy, I'm gonna need to put some support on that, you know. So that's how the process works. That we're stronger together. So that's a good opportunity to do that. But just know that going in there, that, you know, I'm trying to encourage the board that when you hear the recommendation, it's not like, you know, as a courtesy to your fellow member, you just don't have to take it full stop and then you're done. That because he did the review. You know, that's not what we're doing. It's not an expert review. It's just them offering their opinion based on what they saw.
I guess my question is, for this particular instance, the question that we have related to the review, is that and I'm not saying this to single you out, per Commissioner Haston, is this a review, a point of view that all of you believe related to this particular review? Because if it's one that spreads across the board, then of course I think that would be a more appropriate thing to do if we want to look at it again. But if it's like a singular, point of view, then maybe we consider looking at the complaint as it's been presented right now.
I would, go ahead.
You can't really tell how complex the assignment was. I agree with Mr. Pratt.
Is there a scenario where that you would ask for it to be reviewed again by a reviewer? And then you would go to like a third step if there was an issue over that you would have a commissioner review that?
I mean, if there's something that's been presented by a reviewer and we wanted to look at it again, we can.
Yeah.
We've sent things out for review multiple times before.
Yes.
But we try not to do that, but it is possible.
Yes. I would say, I think, prior to having another reviewer review it, I think the more appropriate step would just for a commission member to review the current report.
All we would have to do is just vote to table this till the next meeting.
Yes.
And then we would need someone, of course, to agree to
yes.
review the complaint.
Commissioner Hastings volunteered.
Sounds like
I heard
it.
that, so. Be careful what you wish for, right? Yeah.
Careful what you wish for. The only thing I would add to kind of wrap it up is, there's 4 items that the reviewers identified here. The first one being highest of issues, I think we've kind of talked about. Don't know if that really, that they failed to state the county. The sales comparison is really the only thing that when I read this, looks like there's some substance there as far as violation. The remaining 2, they say raises concerns and may have caused. Yeah, we either table it and look at it further, or I don't think there's a way we can do action. There's too much uncertainty about that.
Yeah, if there's uncertainty, you can either decide to table it, or you can also just decide to disregard that finding from the expert reviewer.
Yes.
As well. So you don't have to take all of the findings as one. You can select them piecemeal based upon the information that's been provided. So if that's something that you want to do as well, if you're like saying this finding, it's a little bit too gray, but I don't see the significance of sending it out again, you can just disregard that and find the ones that you think are the more significant matters.
Yes, absolutely. As the experts in the field, you can determine what you think the reviewer is appropriate finding.
Thank you for the clarification. Yeah, I guess that was, my only sticking point with this one is, I don't know that we have enough information to do any kind of consent order or anything that would go on a national registry at this point. It just doesn't feel that way to me, so.
And you can absolutely, if you did not want to take the next step of reviewing again, do a letter of instruction, a letter of warning, including the information found and I would include what that was found within the review, so that way they know what the reviewer found. We can definitely do that as well.
Short of putting a motion together at this point, I think that's something we should have discussion about. Maybe a letter of warning as opposed to that. If the board thinks that we should go through the process of reviewing that, I think we should have that discussion.
And just to clarify, letter of instructions are not reported to the registry, but letter of warnings are.
Thank you for that clarification. Does anybody have thoughts on that? Maybe either tabling that or doing the letter of warning with the specific citation? Because the only citation I see in here is in the first 2 bullet points relative to the sales comparison. Anybody has any comment on that?
I guess my overall take on this is that they did not select good land comparables. And then when they were questioned by their client, they went back and accepted 2 more to add on. And because of that, they raised the value, which may or may not be correct. We don't know. But the complainant was actually the homeowner, not the lender. So I think they just thought the whole process was flawed. The homeowner did.
Did the bank receive the revised report, or do we know?
It says in there it was
Yes.
it was
They did.
submitted several weeks after the original report.
Yes.
Yeah, you wonder why the homeowner, if were they unhappy with the final value? Is that why they submitted this, or were they just upset with the whole process? That it took so long and that it didn't really make sense to raise it to 100,000, but like we've said, we don't know the percentage. You just don't know a whole lot.
Well, it sounds like it's more of a consensus, so I'll go ahead and make an motion that we push this to next time. If Commissioner Hastings would volunteer to review it, then I think that would be best, so, and maybe that could clear up some of the questions that we have, so I'll put that in the form of a motion.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Commissioner Hastings, I'll get that to you this week.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
We're gonna have to have a course on how to use this mic.
Okay, and then our final one is a representation, number 11-2025-020241. This was for a letter of caution that was issued at the previous meeting for respondents' failure to submit their Tennessee AMC National Registry. However, I've not been successful in contacting them, and it appears they are no longer operating in Tennessee, so I was recommending closing and flagging this complaint, as we do with the other ones.
Motion to close?
Motion on the floor.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I believe that
And that
concludes our
is,
legal report.
yes, the end of the report. Thank you guys for a great birthday morning.
Chair, if you're okay, we've got a open records presentation that Council Matlock is going to present to us. It's just our annual thing that we give for open records. That may take a little bit of time, so if we could just recess for about 10 minutes.
I was going to recommend that, so let's do that. We'll come back in 10.
All right, thanks. We're raring to go if our chair wants to gavel us in.
All right, we'll reconvene.
All right, where we left it was, we were in the legal section, but open meetings and public records. So Anna, if you wouldn't mind.
Good morning and welcome to my TED Talk. I will be discussing open meetings and public records for regulatory boards and commissions. So almost everyone, except a couple of you, have seen this presentation before. It is going to be some of the same information, most of the same information, but there's some new updated information here related to like electronic attendance in meetings. And if you have questions at any time, feel free to, wave or whatever at me, and I will take the question then. Or you can wait until the end, but preferably at that time. Okay. So we titled this presentation, You Are My Sunshine, My Only Sunshine, because we have two different components. The Open Meetings Act is often referred to as the Sunshine Law because we want everything that we do to be open to the public or in the sunshine. And then we also have the public records request. Here is the disclaimer. Basically, we're telling you that the information that's being provided to you should not be taken as a substitute for any professional, like legal advisor from any advisor. So this is given a general information. So there'll be a couple of instances where we're giving examples of things. And as you guys know, everything is very nuanced. So it can be that this example, if it happened in real life, the same circumstances wouldn't have, but generally these are how these things go. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the Public Records Act. So what's included in a public record? Basically everything. Everything. If you are looking at a document and wanting to figure out if it's a public record or not, you would probably defer to, yes, it is a public record. So the documents that we have in the meeting documents, those are public records. Anything submitted to us in our complaint files are considered public records. But for those expert reports, that's considered confidential attorney-client work product, so that's not going to be disclosed in a public record, but anything else that is provided. So we ask you all for, if you're keeping things and talking, so technically, Your personal communications can be considered public records as well. So keep that in mind with what you're stating. So whenever we have a public records request, if we have emails or certain communications, unless it's privileged, then that information is going to be disclosed. What's not included is going to be like the specific devices. So like the iPads, that's not considered to be a public record, but all the items on the iPads, legal report, anything that comes in, licensure data, all of those are going to be public records. So the bulk of the meeting presentation is going to be related to the Open Meetings Act. And the Open Meetings Act, we're going to talk about it in 4 different areas. What is the Open Meetings Act? What is a meeting? What's not a meeting? What's required for a meeting covered by the Open Meetings Act? And then if there is a violation, if the board violates, what happens? Okay, so the chapter that you see on the board is going to be, the title is 844-101. That's the section related to public open meetings. And so the General Assembly declared to be policy of the state that the formulation of public policy and decisions shall not be conducted in secret. So everything that is going to be related specifically to the public, that needs to be done in an open public forum. This does not limit any of the rights and privileges contained in Article 1, Section 19 of the Constitution of Tennessee. Who knows what that is? No one? Okay, me either. I had to look it up. It is the article that relates to free speech. So freedom of speech is not going to be, your rights and privileges are not limited in the Open Meetings Act. The goal is to promote openness and accountability in the government to protect the public's interest. So it is always great to interpret it broadly. So if you're trying to determine whether something needs to be done in an open meeting, I usually say to people when they ask the question, you know the answer. So does it need to be done in a meeting? Most likely, yes. It's I think the hesitancy that some people have to ask about it. So they are all meetings of the governing body, which is what this commission is called. You are considered to be a governing body or declared to be public meetings and open to the public at all times, except as instances provided by the Constitution of Tennessee. There's one particular kind of instance that would apply to this board. We're going to talk about it a little bit later, but everything else needs to be done in a public space in the sunshine. So as I stated before, a governing body, that's a board, mostly 2 or more members that are making decisions or recommendations for public policy that impacts the public. So in the department, it applies to all of our boards and commissions. So this applies also to every board meeting. So if we have a committee meeting, that is an open meeting. Any subcommittee meetings, those special meetings, all of those are open meetings. And electronic meetings, open meetings. So every single meeting related to the board, except that one thing that we're going to talk about, is supposed to be open to the public. So what is not included is going to be any on-site inspection of any project or program. So if someone were to come and, I don't know, audit the commission every other year because they're a federal agency, that's not going to be considered a public record or an open meeting requirement. So, but this elusive hypothetical body, if that were to happen, could not make any decisions related to the hypothetical board. So basically, ASC audits are not required to be noticed for the public. It also does not include a chance meeting of 2 or more members of a public body. However, no chance meetings, and I want to make sure I read this directly because I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. Chance meetings are informal assemblages, what a word, can be used to decide or deliberate public business in circumvention of the spirit or requirements of the Open Meetings Act. So let's say Commissioner Haston and Commissioner Mansfield decide to run the New York Marathon, and you guys run into each other at the marathon, and you decide to have a conversation. That would be considered a chance meeting. So the 2 of you guys deciding to show up and deciding to speak at that time, as long as you're not talking about board business, it's not considered a public meeting. However, if Commissioner Mello and Commissioner Pratt decided to hold a meeting at Starbucks to talk about the legal report before we report it, that is not a chance meeting, and that would need to be a notice to the public. So when talking about these things, we do understand, and I want to state this, that a lot of you know each other because you are members of the same industry. That's not to tell you that you're not allowed to speak to each other outside of this meeting. I would love it if you didn't, just like for secret purposes, but I know that's not realistic. But I want to really emphasize that you're not deciding or deliberating board business. So I think one of our board members stated if they wanted to send out like a sympathy card to someone because of something happened, that's okay to do as long as you don't put in the sympathy card and related to number 10 on the legal report. Put in there a civil penalty. So as long as you're not like sliding things in those types of conversations, that would be great. So those types of things, like I know if some of our boards, they have dinners before board meetings. I hate them because I don't know what's going on at those meetings unless I'm going there. I'm in full faith and confidence, believe that they would not talk about board meetings, but like sometimes it's hard not to. So just don't do it. Thank you. So that's why I was saying, board members, you may share a meal and where public business is not conducted, as long as there are no like proposed agendas or anything on there where we should be fine. Also, this doesn't include, any lunch breaks that we have or recesses. So if we were to have for example, today we recess and then we have a formal hearing the next day, that doesn't mean that that's not considered to be a meeting. But again, these are all times where board business should not be discussed. Okay, so regular meetings, special meetings, all of those are applied. So I have alluded several times to the one instance where the public is not required to be noticed, and that's going to be considered executive sessions. So executive sessions occur where these are three different components. All of them have to be there in order to be an executive session. One or more members meet with the board's attorney, and the board is under threat of lawsuit or has been threatened with suit, and the members ask their attorney questions related to such a suit. So whenever we have an executive session, the people that are in charge of the executive session are going to be right here, these two. And your role in an executive session is only to ask questions. You're asking us questions, we're informing information. This board has been lucky to not have to go through executive sessions related to threat of lawsuit, but some of my other boards are not so lucky. And so in these type of situations, it's more of an informational session related to everyone. So that is an executive session. Very seldom are these held. Also, a couple of other things that may fall into an executive session. When we talked about the retrospective rule review, initially before we voted on that was held in executive session because we were letting you know some of the decisions we decided related to those rules, because that information was shared with like the governor's office. That's considered to be their work product, and we can't share that with people before it's been presented, or also if there are specific HR issues related to those types of things. Some of our boards meet and deliberate related to their executive directors as they're hired directly by the board, and they'll set compensation and those types of things. So as I stated before, there are no deliberations about any specific matter brought in executive session. And this is just an example of how far it goes. So I mentioned HR issues, maybe an issue related to executive session. However, oral interviews. So if we were to interview individuals for in a position, that would need to be done in a board meeting. And I've seen that done before in some of our other board meetings where the board will just ask the person questions. Those are required to be noticed to the public. However, if we're talking about sensitive financial information or things that would be normally excluded, that's not required. So in this particular instance, any interviews were conducted to it with persons applying for jobs were required to be noticed. Okay, these are examples. So it states here, Brett Mansfield, because that's the chair, said, here's a news article. That's fine. That's not a meeting. I don't know why you want to share news articles with us, but you can if you want to. Also, I'd like something included on the next agenda. If there's something that you want to talk about the next agenda, you can definitely do this. What is not okay is to say, here's a news item about one of our licensees, we should consider revocation. Don't ever want to see one of those emails. If you have questions related to licensees, something that you've seen, let me know. And we can talk about it there, but let's not send an email out to the whole board about things that we might possibly do. Also, when we send you information for meetings, you'll see that you all are blind copied. The reason is because we kind of talked about it here, have board business, and if we were 2 or more of you to be on that email, it would consider to be a meeting. We wouldn't need to notice to everyone. So that's why the members are blind copied, but also if you ever have a communication, that's something related to the board and you want to talk about it, and you email Glenn, you can CC me on that email. It doesn't automatically mean that it's going to be considered attorney-client privilege. However, having that safeguard is always a good thing to have. It's just very determinative of what it's going to be. So if you have those questions, let us know. Okay. If a member emails another commissioner, if you send an email or pick up the phone to call them, that's not a chance meeting. So if you decide to pick up the phone and say, hey, Commissioner Bynum, I want to talk about the education report. I saw some things in it, and let's get this on the record. No, that's not a chance meeting because you deliberately called that person to be on the phone. Again, if you're calling someone to talk about something that's completely not board business, that is permissible. However, would prefer you not to, just because we want to make sure that it's not an improper thing. But I do know it's not possible to prohibit all conversations, especially if you are friends and colleagues. So if there's something that is like a business related matter and you guys, are doing like a group appraisal and all of you guys got on the same group, actually tell me about it first because that's weird. But secondly, if we are working together on a project or something and it has nothing to do with this board, then that would be okay. But also let me know, because if that person were to open a complaint, I don't really know how that situation goes. Okay. All right, I keep rolling this the wrong way. So what if one or more of our members cannot attend a meeting in person? So this is one of the things that I was mentioning beforehand. So previously, what was required for a physical quorum was required for all board meetings. That means that for this particular board, we would have to have five people in this room in order for it to be a quorum. However, a new statute was passed this year stating we can have a combination of individuals, virtual and in person, to meet quorum. So that means technically we would need to have, one person here, and if 8 of you are online, that's possible. So that's really the reason that it is not to shift us completely towards electronic meetings. However, some of our boards are smaller and some of our boards have individuals that are unable to meet in person just due to the nature of their jobs, such as, being judges or those types of things. That person that's why it's possible. Yes, ma'am.
At Arrow, one of the other states mentioned that's the way they now connect. They have one person in the room and everybody else is on Zoom.
Yes, that is possible. And also, if the board, for some reason, we needed to switch to an electronic method, we are required in this particular instance, a board is required to have a physical quorum every 2 years in a meeting. So if all of the meetings were to go virtual, that is possible. But the thing is, when virtual meetings occur, we require a couple more things. For example, all of our votes would have to be roll call votes. Also, we need to make sure that each person during conversation is identifiable. So that would be saying, this is Anna Matlock, I'm not in speaking, so people are able to figure out and see or hear which person is making the specific comment. So I stated, this is just what it's stating before here. If you're participating by electronic means, that's considered to be physically present for meetings for voting purposes and establishing quorum, and that we're required to have one meeting, physical quorum in person every 2 calendar years. And if for some reason we didn't do that, we have to report that to the Secretary of State. So just kind of highlighting what we stated before, the act is to be construed most favorably to the public, and meaning that if we're looking at whether a matter is to be public facing or not, then there would be kind of sort of like a rebuttal presumption. We would need to explain why this is not a public meeting, then not the opposite way. So we just want to make sure that everything is being done in the public space. So this is stating how the public has the right to attend, observe, and make comments during our meetings. You know, we have a public meeting, public comment section. So the public is available to talk about those items, but it's usually limited to the items that are listed on the agenda. And the board, and we said, you know, we try to ask people to limit their comments to around 3 minutes. And to limit those matters on the meeting. However, it does not give our citizens the right to actively participate in the public meeting. So that doesn't mean that a member of the public, just because they are here, can decide that they want to vote on items on the legal report. They don't, that's a little bit step too far. But if there are questions or those types of things, they're available to do that. So what is adequate notice? There are 3 different prongs: reasonably, sufficiently, and posted. The contents have to be, the notice has to be reasonably describe the purpose of the meeting, which is usually what we do is through the agenda, and that's usually posted a couple of days before the meeting, a week to like 5 days to a week out. Adequate public notice must be posted in advance of the actual meeting, so we're giving them opportunity to arrive at the meeting if they want to. And then it must be posted in a location where a member of the community can become aware of such notice. So the internet and the newspaper. So if we wanted, we could make a notice of our meeting in like the Tennessean, but we're not going to do that. So usually what our meetings are posted on our website and accessible for individuals that way. And another way was like to post them on bulletin boards. No, but we could. So posting it online, we just need to let the location to be aware of the person, and that's what we just do. We post it on the website. So also another thing about our meetings, because this actually happened, I was at the meeting in the Real Estate Commission last week in Jackson, and I got an email during the meeting from someone saying, hey, I cannot access the meeting online. The meeting link is not there. And so I was like, is that person required to be able to view the meeting online at all times? No, not necessarily. It's our practice that they can view online through the public link and also through Teams. But unless there was some kind of virtual attendance, if everything is in person, that person could have driven to Jackson and they can watch the meeting afterwards. But if it's technically you're not required to have that like simultaneous stream available to people. Yep. What the impact of these types of things related to notice. So if there were to be a violation of the Open Meetings Act, the legal consequences and effects, we have 2. Nullity, and then the other is going to be cost and attorney's fees. So that means anything that is conducted in a space that's not considered to be it was not a public meeting, anything done at that meeting does not count, does not it's null and void. You're not able to use any of those decisions at that time. Also, we put costs and attorney's fees because the board at that point would be liable to pursuit related to those things if someone were to sue the board because they're unable to get to a public meeting. And then any course and attorney's fees are related to that. Yep, in a nutshell, we want to make sure our board business is conducted in an accessible way to the public, and this applies to you individually as a person and collectively as a board. All of our meetings are basically going to be public meetings, and the only things that are going to be the exception are going to be executive session, and every meeting we're required to give notice. So if you violate the law, any violative acts are void, cost of litigation and attorney's fees may be assessed against the board. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk to you all about is North Carolina Board of Dental Examiners versus the FTC. This is a case that we talk about in your board member orientation, but we want everyone to be aware of it just moving forward. So essentially what happened in this case was the North Carolina Board of Dental Examiners sent out several cease and desist letters to individuals that were doing teeth whitening. That was considered to be outside the board, going outside of their jurisdiction. They were limiting the ability for other individuals to do that type of work. It was not within their scope. And so the board at that time, they argued state action immunity, and they lost. So as a board member, you are generally protected through state action immunity, meaning if the board were to be sued, you would be sued in your capacity as a board member. So it would be Sandra Tuck, member of the Tennessee Real Estate Appraiser Commission, if the board were to be sued. However, in instances where this protection is not available, it is possible that you could be sued individually. So if the board is sued, we have representation through the Office of the Attorney General. If you are sued individually, that means you're responsible for your own legal counsel. There are a lot of safeguards that the department has to make sure that this doesn't happen, but this is like, we've had these conversations a couple of times to make sure that we're not going outside of the bounds of the things that we can and cannot regulate. So we don't want to have any anti-competitive practices. So in this case, the board, they weren't supervised in the decisions that were being made when the letters were being sent out. And so state agencies, you don't necessarily get immunity, but it requires more than a mere facade of state involvement for it to be necessary to ensure that the states accept political accountability for anti-competitive conduct they permit and control. So what is active state supervision? I'll tell you what it looks like in our situation. So during the meetings, you have legal counsel that reviews, we're here and immediately available to look and make sure we're not doing any practices that look like we're trying to regulate outside of the industry. Also, we have a policy director. She watches all of our board meetings to make sure that there are not any issues that go outside of our anti-competitive practices, and we'll review those things. Sometimes there might be follow-up questions related to it, but it's not really that situation. Also, this was codified in a specific statute in 4-4-1265. The supervising official is considered to be the commissioner or anybody that's delegated to it. And we have other additional safeguards in the statute for if something's we think may be an anti-competitive practice. So if the board made a decision and we decided it was an anti-competitive practice, what would happen is the first thing is probably we would have a special meeting. And at that special meeting, you would discuss the issue and with the attempts to overrule the decision, to overturn it. At that time, for the board to walk that decision back. If for some reason the board was super defiant and decided, hey, we're not going to do that, the commissioner ultimately has a veto power of the decision that's been made by the board. And so at that point, the commissioner can veto the decision that was made by the board, and that is just required to go on a report to the General Assembly. So I stated here what's happened. We provide further notice within 10 business days to talk about the decision, and then we either approve the action, remand the action, or veto the action. Those are the things that are related to it. if something is required further review. So, any questions? You have my contact information, but if you need it again, it's up here on the board. But like I stated before, the most thing, we want to make sure that we're only discussing board business during the board meeting. And if you have documents that come into your possession, those are more likely than not going to be considered a public record. So be conscious of the things that you are putting in writing and transmitting to us and not to each other, because we don't want to do that. Are there any additional questions?
So we definitely shouldn't talk about how much appraisers would charge for an appraisal, because that could be restrictive in trade, right? Because that's how it is in the real estate world, of where that we can't talk about what we charge in an open forum of, because that
So
could be restrictive in trade.
that's kind of, I know what you're talking about. So that commission does not regulate commissions. And also what you're talking about is more of kind of like an NAR thing than a Tennessee Real Estate Commission thing.
Right.
We can discuss what we are charging. We can have a general discussion, but this board can't like set the tone of what residential appraisals should be charged for, or what commercial appraisals should be doing. That would be considered something that is outside of our jurisdiction. So we can have general conversations about it, but ultimately what someone charges is not going to be something that falls within our jurisdiction.
That's why I wanted that clarification.
Yes.
Yeah.
What about if an individual reaches out to us as a commission member for clarification? Oh, my continuing education, do I have to, I can take this online now, correct? Or, something like that.
Right. So I'm convinced that my name is on a bulletin board somewhere and people send continuing education questions to me. No lie. I only get them from real estate appraisers. And it's like once a month, someone will ask me if they're required to be in person in a continuing education. I was like, I don't understand how we're still talking about this. But if my name is on a bulletin board, please take it down. I don't know how everybody has my name on there. But if someone were to ask you a question related to continuing education, what I would do is just refer them to the commission staff, and we'll take care of that particular situation. But if you happen to know it on your own, of course, you're welcome to share that information with them, but just refer it to us, and we'll take care of it. But I do know that sometimes people will approach you in your capacity as a real estate on this commission. And so at that time, what I would do is politely decline to discuss the matter at that time. So if they're talking about a particular case that's on there, we don't want to give those decisions because, one, you can't speak for the board individually at any given time. So anything that you say to them would not be correct. But also, we don't want, in those situations, just tell them you can't talk about it. I think that would be the easiest way for you guys to just kind of like do the Heisman in that situation.
Go ahead.
Two things real quickly.
Yes.
I got contacted by email by someone in terms of my capacity on board, and I transferred on to you, Glenn. Was that the appropriate thing? Do you
Yeah.
remember that?
Yeah, I get a lot of those, so yeah, just to her point, just.
I didn't respond to them, I just forwarded on.
Right, and if it's like,
I didn't want to say something.
yeah, that's fine to like, especially if it's an email, just go ahead and forward it on to us. And usually what we'll do is say,
They
I
like
was contacted by
communication, trying
you.
to Streamline, take
Yeah.
some courses, whatever.
And we want to
My-
make sure that we like have the same consistent information too.
My other question is, let's say I'd had a question about an upcoming meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I had a question, my question should go to Glenn rather than to Sandra, correct?
Right, your
Okay.
question should be, generally, yes.
Now, I'm somewhat free talking to Glenn or Will or whatever, if I've got a question about something I'm doing in terms of my review or whatever.
Right, and
That-
also,
That's not viewed as open meeting.
yes, and also I am your counsel.
Okay.
So the legal advice that I give is not available to the public, it is available to the board.
Okay.
So that doesn't necessarily say, hey, Anna, I've been sued personally, what do I do? Your job at that point is to find individual counsel for that. But however, if you have questions related to this board, then I will answer you, telling you either what the answer is or why I cannot answer you in that particular situation. But I don't want this to deter you from seeking out counsel from your counsel or seeking out assistance from the program staff, because that's why we're here for you. So I think no one really likes to answer those questions. So if you just want to tell them, hey, I'm going to refer you to our commission staff and we'll handle that.
Question for you. What if a commissioner has a question that's come up with an experience review and needs advice on how to proceed and would like to talk to another commissioner? That's not allowed?
That would not be a conversation that you would need. That would be something that you would probably ask here at the board meeting, because it's ultimately related to board business and decision would probably need to be made at that time. So if you have a question and you reach out to another person, that's not a chance meeting and it's related to board business. So if it has something to do with it, what I recommend is, when you make those recommendations, tell Glenn, hey, I have a question, want to present it to the board at the meeting. Then once I get my answer, I'll make my determination at that point.
So if it's sort of sensitive, then I just need to, I'm sort of on my own at that point?
Without disclosing it, what do you mean by sensitive? Like if it's related to... The question that you ask is a hypothetical question. It's not referring to any person, so you can ask me.
I think that my hypothetical, I just need to sort of work through it on my own.
Okay, sure, no problem. If you want to ask me later, you can ask me, and I can tell you. We don't have to talk about it here at the board meeting. But generally, if it's like a more sensitive topic or something, we always say that in our meetings that anything related to, not saying this is what it is, but I just want everyone to know, topics that are not for board discussion, or it's going to be anything related to like religion, race, politics, or any of those types of things. Those things fall outside of considerations and conversations we should be having in board meetings. But just reach out to me, ask me what the question is, and then I'll get back to you with an answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions?
My only other question, which I would ask the chair is that, with the electronic meeting, of course, I drive 2.5 hours to the meeting. I'm not going to put the rest of you all in the situation of where I'm not going to come because it's 2.5 hours. But it would be nice to know from the chair or from the director of if there's somebody not going to be here that is going to be electronically in the meeting, because we're going to have to go through those protocols anyways, that we would know that up front so that we could make a decision not to come and participate at that time as well. If there's somebody that would be a nice gesture of where that we didn't have to come when we're going to have to go through those same protocols already.
Right. So our preference is going to be at this time for the meetings to be in person. So I foresee this being an act, and Glenn, you can correct me if we had an issue where we could only have like 4 people say that they could be at the meeting, and we need a 5th person to attend, and that person's like, I can attend, but I cannot leave my house. There is a flood. So if there's something like that, that's where I would see the type of situation going. But if for you can't make it, but we've got 5 people here, then we don't necessarily have to have you appear electronically.
Thank you, Anna. That was right. I look at this as an opportunity to save our meetings in case, because we've had stuff where, and the rule of 3, you'll have somebody have something happen, then 1 or 2 other folks, and next thing you're like, oh my goodness, we don't have a meeting. That's really what this is for. For all intents and purposes, we'll have our physical meetings, but if something was to come up, now we're not scrambling trying to save our meeting. We can, and I always. And you recall, and then the emails I send you, let us know as a courtesy to our other folks. And of course, I'll have to tool that a little bit because those aren't all required to be fit in person. But if, I don't typically, if we're on the bubble, you know, I'll usually communicate that to everybody. I've probably even reached out to a couple of you before, and I'm like, hey, look, we're kind of close. I mean, are you sure you're coming? You know, that, because, and I always try to make sure in the past, that I have one more, because if, you know, somebody gets a flat tire and then last minute something else happens to somebody, I'm always thinking about those members that are traveling. I don't, you know, because that's a very uneasy situation for everybody. So yeah, I feel a lot better now that we have this opportunity, because now we're no longer restricted to just the physical meetings. And so if as life comes at us, but for the members, and she talked about this, and thank you, Ann, for doing that, but those small boards, that was a real problem. You have 4 members, you lose one, now everybody's got to come. There's no exception. You know, and then otherwise you lose the meeting. And if they're only meeting quarterly, now what? You've got a legal report. That's not so much a problem with this board. So,
Right. My boards that have like 9 members, I'm not as necessarily concerned, but my boards where I have like 5 members, and at that time we only have 4 people on the commission and one person says they can't come, everybody has to be in person. So it's really designed helpful for those boards that we have where smaller groups of people, or the boards that just due to the composition of the board, it's very difficult to meet in person because of their positions or whatever they're able to do. So yes, it's available, but if we already have quorum, you're not required to appear electronically. Okay. If you have any additional questions, of course, reach out to me individually, and I will be happy to speak with you. And you should not have to hear from me again until later in 2026, if not 2027. So thank you for listening.
thank you, Anna. All right. New business. I just had a couple little announcements, and but I'll wait for those unless you had anything that the board has for new business.
I had just 2 quick things. So I guess by the time we meet next time, this fair housing class is going to be required.
That's correct.
And so I did see that on the education report that I guess there is an 8-hour class. So
Yeah. There was several that all last minute, you know, so
Yeah.
that I was grateful for that, because last time we were talking, we didn't have
we
an
didn't have
8-hour
one.
class. Yeah.
Correct. So and then I know in the last meeting too, we had a committee maybe for this review or for the template. Did that take place?
No,
Or
you hit both of them. That was one of mine. One of my announcements, since while we're talking about it, we will have a committee meeting for expert review, the expert review committee. That will occur, our next meeting, January 26th. That will be 9 o'clock. And so Mr. Pratt and Mr. Haston and Van Dever, he'll be here as well. He wasn't with us here today, but they'll meet at 9, and then the full board at 10. So I'll let you guys know it well in advance. It'll be on the agenda as well, as we noticed that. But, you know, for those of you that are on the committee, 10 o'clock is when you'll be here in January 26th, and they'll be in this room.
Do you have the dates for all of next year?
I do. Those are on the website as well, or should be. I think they are. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. They're on there. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But very quickly, if you wanted to know the dates, we have January 26th, April 20th, July 20th, and October 19th.
So we'll just have to celebrate our birthday early.
Yep.
I know, you're always ruining my birthday vacation plans.
My wicked plan. Did you have anything else? Okay. And then the other thing too was just a fun piece. Mr. Van Dever couldn't be here, and a couple of his associates were promoted to CG recently, Jack Hatcher and Jaron Sissom. So he wanted just to kind of give them a shout out. So in his stead, I'm just acknowledging their achievement, and that is achievement. Yeah, all of you that have come into licensure, you understand that. And so anyway, just he's celebrating today. Couldn't be with us today, but nonetheless, he wanted that relayed. Do we have anything else? All right, public comments then. Do we have anyone signed in there, Alex? Okay. And there's no one here as well. So one last chance. If there's anyone online that would like to sign in, this would be your opportunity to do that. We are at the public comment section, and no one here. So, Chair?
all right, this will conclude our meeting.
All right, we are adjourned.